Viking from Vaughan Morford Metalcraft. And as you can see, we have a fair few things to have a look at today. So Vaughan, do you want to just quickly take us through what it is that you're wearing first and foremost?
Oh, thanks, Sam. Got a woolen Viking era tunic.
Mm-hmm.
It was made in Russia. Fairly good. There's not a lot of evidence for padded clothing worn with armor anyway, so most of people would have been wearing wool if they could afford it, otherwise it would have been linen. Underneath is a linen undertunic, linen pants, and Viking aged boots.
What are those blue wrappings on the top of the boots there?
They're called winigers, or leg bindings. Essentially, it's like a pair of socks that you would use to keep the lower halves warm, and they run into the shoes to keep your lower legs warm.
And did everyone wear those, or was it?
No, apparently there wasn't a lot of evidence for them in Iceland.
Okay.
But I'd say it would be up to individual preference if they wanted them or not anyway.
Mm.
They do tend to slip. I noticed that you constantly have to adjust them.
So they might have had pins and stuff.
Definitely.
That's pretty
cool.
cool.
They might have even sewn some of them together, I'm not even sure.
Well, that would make sense. And what have you got around your neck there?
Ah, yes, Thor's hammer. This is based off a fairly recent find, and it's quite unique because it's got basic patterning, which is fairly normal, but on the reverse side, it's got in runic, which is very uncommon for hammers. It says hammer is. So if there was any conjecture about whether these were hammers or anchors, they are indeed hammers because they said so.
There you go. We'll do a close-up of that later on. And what about the button? That's not a button, is it, on your top of your thing?
No, it's a brooch, and it holds my tunic together at the top. And that was made by Thorkill, very well-renowned smith who makes a lot of very beautiful things.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it's essentially just like a fastener or like a button, really. It just holds the top part of your tunic together.
Okay, that's pretty cool. And what abouts have we got in front of the table here? Starting from the back and working our way forward.
Oh, that's all right. So we'll start with the sax, which was like a Viking Age utility knife, essentially. It was a weapon and a tool and whatever. Most people carried knives if they could afford to. And they were a general tool. You'd use it for eating, cutting leather, cutting food, skinning a fish, whatever you needed to have.
It's a utility knife.
Exactly. It was there for when you needed it. This one is made by Jorgencraft. Has an English oak handle and a carbon steel blade. And scabbard goes with it. Very nice.
Pretty fancy. And that's a custom fit scabbard. So
yeah, the scabbard was made for the knife. I actually have two scabbards for it. This is the fancier version. I've got a plain leather one as well.
All right, fantastic. And did they ever make weaponized versions of them?
Oh yes, there were great saxes. They even got to the point of two-handed saxes. So ridiculously long war knives that were pure weapons. This one is not really. It's more of a tool. But
yeah.
Yes, they did get quite long.
Very much a utility knife versus the big sort of Thames. What's it called? The one with the alphabet rune along the back of it. Whatever it's called. It's the one in the English Museum or the London Museum or whatever.
It escapes me now, but yeah, I know the one you mean.
Yeah, but that's a big fighting knife kind of thing.
That's a war knife, and they seem to have been sort of a migration era thing that definitely stuck around in Scandinavia, whereas in somewhere like Anglo-Saxon England and stuff, they went out of favour.
Interesting.
Not sure why.
And they tend, the longer they are, they seem to be horizontally strapped rather than that one which is on a lanyard.
They don't hang vertically, they hang sideways. So the longer they get, there's usually multiple attachment points, and they sit either behind you on your back or on your hip in place of a sword or.
Migration. The helmet you have in particular is very interesting.
The Sutton Hoo helmet.
Yeah.
very recognizable. I'm sure a lot of people, even if they aren't familiar with this stuff, would know what this one is. Famously put together before World War II and then taken apart because they didn't do a particularly great job of putting it together the first time.
Nailed it.
This one's a replica made by Hanwei, which is sadly out of production now. They do not make these anymore. It's the best replica, would you say best replica off the shelf that you can buy? The ones from Replica are not so flash. There are custom makers that would make fancier ones, but this one's fairly close in terms of dimension. And what sets it apart is that it's obviously, you know, a Dark Ages, I think it was Vendel or Saxon from memory. It was old when it went into the ground. It was already over 100 years old. But what sets it apart is its obvious Roman origins. If you look at the back and the cheek plates, this is a Roman cavalry helmet. So the design's obviously stuck through and kept being made the way they are. Even the riser is very reminiscent of the iron band that runs up the top of Roman helmets.
Fascinating.
But obviously very much influenced by Norse and Anglo-Saxon culture, as well as the Vendel cultures that you see from the Valsgrade helmets.
Yeah.
Are a very similar sort of thing. But yeah, fascinating helmet. I was very lucky to get it. It's a very nice piece.
And they don't make them. They don't make them like that anymore. Literally.
Literally and figuratively. Yes.
There you go. Jiggeries. And it seems to have a matching pouch, if I can tell there, the red and brass pouch.
Yes, this is a similar era pouch with the ravens. This again was made by Jorgencraft. Very nice work. The very small pouch. It wouldn't have been used to carry much. I would guess it was for carrying money or something along those lines. You can see.
Wow, look at that detail.
See the leather work here, and the straps have a similar thing. This is Replica brass that's been hammered out. It's all riveted.
And what do you use it for generally?
I use it to store my phone.
Nice. Yeah.
Which is a very modern thing. You know, we still have to carry phones in acting, so it's part of the deal.
Well, that's a good way of carrying it, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what's the pouch behind it there?
This is more of a Viking era pouch. It's got a ringak beast design on it, which I think is a deer, judging by the antlers. This particular one was made by the Yelling Dragon from the UK. I've made similar ones myself, but I have a policy of not keeping my own stuff, as I tend to sell it. So I tend not to keep my own gear.
Almost like it's your job.
That is true. So most of my items aren't made by me, or at least not entirely. And
The items, that is to say, you own,
exactly.
that you're wearing, rather than
I
that
have
you
it
sell
done.
to other people.
I used to make it all myself, and then I found that I would sell it because I thought, oh well, I can just make it again.
Yeah.
So now I have a policy of not keeping my own things.
That's a good way.
So yeah, this is a much simpler pouch. It's my basic belt pouch that I use for carrying all sorts of different things. Nice piece of antler here is the toggle.
And I guess that works with if it is presumably a deer or elk or something on the front.
Yeah, it's quite nice. You know, it's not overly fancy. It's a simple pouch, but it's good.
And we have a third pouch. They didn't have pockets, so obviously they had to carry a lot of pouches. So what's with this? You don't have to pick it up. I'll zoom in. There we go. So, but what have we got going on here with this pouch?
It's essentially a wallet.
Right.
Now, I did make this one purely because no one's making them, or at least not that I could see. And it's essentially made for carrying money and valuables. So I've got a selection of silver coins and ingots that I've made. Silver Thor's hammer. Rings, that sort of thing. And yeah, it's fairly close replica of a museum piece.
Okay, and what's that? That's amber in the front,
Yeah,
an amber
amber
necklace.
beads, very tradable, especially in the Baltic nations and Scandinavia.
Mm.
People loved amber, and yeah, stringing amber is a pain in the ass, if we can say that on the internet. Um,
You can say more than that on the internet, but we won't.
um, very, very delicate and fragile. It cracks very easily, and
Mm.
if you force it on a string and it doesn't want to go, it'll break. So it's a lot of very patient work with a very fine needle, but looks very nice.
Good. And what's with the glass toggle on it?
The eye bead.
Mm.
The original one from memory has, I think, a ceramic or a bone bead on it. I chose to use an eye bead because I had some and they looked quite nice. Very common in Scandinavia as well. Glass was very expensive. Um, it was hard to produce, and people like colourful, shiny things.
Mm.
So yeah, that's a nice little piece that looks.
A little personal touch to it.
Yeah, I thought so.
There you go. So your wallet can watch itself. It's got all
That's
the
correct,
eyes.
Yeah.
That's
No
fascinating.
spirits will be taking your money.
And what are the things next to it? What's this other jewellery?
Okay, so we've got some arm rings, which were very common, especially people who were maybe sworn under oath would be given one as a like a badge of office or a symbol of the bond that you would have. So you would get given one as your part of the deal. In which case you'd be expected to hold it up and held to your oath in case it ever gets called in.
Jeez, that's
But
pretty...
they're also used as a way of carrying money.
Mm.
So a lot of what you see in Scandinavia, if it was silver, it's worth its weight in silver more than it is in the form it's in. They would chop it up and use it as currency regardless of what shape it was in, because that was the metal that was valuable.
Not necessarily the craftsmanship,
exactly.
except in, I presume, something like peacetime or general trading, where you'd be like,
something
here you
like
go.
this is obviously a lot more complicated, and it would be worth more than this. But going everywhere.
Grab that
But
one.
they are worth their weight in metal as above to maybe what they were made into.
Okay, that's an interesting way of... I guess it's conspicuous consumption, isn't it? You know, you're literally displaying not only the fact that you have material wealth, the raw material, but also the fact you can afford to have it produced and created.
Exactly.
In
And
this
keeping
particular
it on
way.
your body is a great way to make sure it doesn't get stolen.
Yeah, no doubt.
Never trust the thralls at home; they'd always be picking up. Here we have a very nice brooch that was made for me by a maker in Ireland.
Wow.
And I apologise for not being able to pronounce your name, but I'll put a little link in there.
In the bottom, yeah.
And there he does amazing work. This one had a few incarnations before we actually had it produced. There was a bit of a story there. But it's based off a Scandinavian find. I can't remember exactly which one, but nice piece. It's very Irish. It looks almost like it's got Irish influence in it with the very long pins that they seem to have.
Or is that because the Irish have Viking influence?
Well, that's it's a bit of backwards and forwards.
Oh, yeah, that's how it's done.
But yeah, very nice work, and I'm very happy to have it. So thank you.
There you go. So that's the jewellery. Did they also have other materials like fur and other things like that?
Yeah, fur and wool, both very tradable objects. Woolen cloth is expensive. Even a woolen shirt is worth a lot of money. So people often think of cloth as just cloth. Well, no, cloth is very valuable.
This is pre-industrialization, so this is made by hand. It's threaded, picked, turned into string or yarn, presumably.
And it has to have the long process of weaving it.
Yep.
When it's an interesting thing because you see an awful lot of Viking era shirts that have interesting patterning, or the way they were put together was maybe not something people would think about. I guess it was to do with the fact that they wanted to use every single scrap of that fabric, no matter how random a shaped piece it was, because cloth was too valuable to waste. So there's one shirt in particular that's made of panels that go all different directions and a piece sewn in the middle. My guess would be that was to do with using up all the fabric and making sure that nothing was wasted.
Fascinating. And I guess to an extent you could also use that as a fashion way, because you can change the colour and pattern.
I'm sure that they did that too, but yeah.
There you go. And what's the fur on your hat there, your Burka trader hat?
This is a fox fur. So,
okay.
There's also wolf furs they would have used, and bear and rabbit, obviously.
Yeah.
Things
But
like
we're doing our part in Australia by using fox.
Yeah, this fox. Yeah, in Australia, I'm not sure if you're from here or around the world, but foxes are a bit of a problem.
That's the wool on the hat.
Yeah.
And what else is wool?
Well, the cloak here is also wool, which we're using as a lovely tablecloth. Herringbone patterns were very popular. You can see them on my Winnegers. The hat has a pattern similar to that as well. This is a woolen cloak from the UK. Woolen fabric from the UK. I'm just showing it here. It's a dark blue herringbone pattern. Very nice wool. Keeps you very warm.
And how big is it? Like earlier when we saw some of the pictures, it seems like you had it doubled over.
It is. It's doubled over. It's quite large. If you can imagine a large single bed blanket, essentially that's what it is.
Wow.
And at night time you would unpin it and use it as a blanket, which is what they were for. You carry your blanket and it keeps you warm during the day. So, yeah.
And you can use it for a bag as well, can't you? I've seen people
there are
roll
ways
them up.
To fold and pin them as well, to turn them into hoods. You can fold them and turn them into a bag. The great kilts, which are essentially the same sort of thing, they pin and fold to make pouches and hoods and folds and all
manner of stuff.
But mainly it works the way a coat today works. You wear it as a blanket and it becomes your blanket at night time. So
Fascinating. And convert it to hoods and things like that.
Exactly. Whatever use you needed.
And were they ever lined, or did they just have them straight like that?
It's possible that some of them were, probably fancier ones, and they do have things like embroidery and silk trims and tassels and all sorts of things. This one's very plain at the moment. I do intend to sew it and make little,
blanket stitches along the edge.
Yeah, and maybe some little tassels on the edges. I'm not sure. I'll decide when I feel like doing it. But yeah, it's nice wool. It's important to get good wool. A lot of reenactors suffer badly from using cotton or like bad mixed wools that are mostly nylon or rayon
polyester
or
and stuff.
So
what's the lowest, in your personal opinion? What's the lowest? Because a cloak is huge. It's a big piece of cloth.
It is.
It is one of probably the cool items that people want to get as soon as possible.
Yeah.
It's also a very practical item because you can cover stuff up. What would be the lowest percentage if you were getting a woolen cloak, which is what most people do? What would be the lowest you'd go?
The higher end, so like 80-90% wool if you can avoid it, if you can help it. A lot of military blankets sit around that level, so if you can get a good quality green army blanket, they make quite good cloaks and they're really good for warmth.
I've also seen some very old picnic blankets. They're sometimes 100% wool, and they're already tartan.
Yeah,
if that's your thing.
Those are good. The older stuff seems to be better if you can afford, if you can find it. Getting wool for cloaks these days tends to nearly always be suiting fabric, gentlemen's suits. The UK is really good for getting that sort of stuff. It makes great cloaks. Unfortunately, it's very expensive. The wool in this cloak alone is about $200 Australian.
Whoa, yeah.
So not an item that you want to just go out and buy and then change your mind. They are important though, and if you were to do a proper reenacting and you expect to be doing camping and stuff, definitely. It's not really an option, it's a necessity, especially if it's